What's up, guys? It is your boy Samoan Fan 101, and today, well, really it's tonight. Right now it's 9:44 p.m. and I'm doing this right before I go to bed because apparently I was lazy to do it more than an hour ago, uh, or several hours ago actually. And this is my review of Thor, which is a very good film. Start that off real quick. I'm gonna turn on the fan here. Keep in mind I live in Arizona, so it is a little hot. So if you hear a fan, it's on me because I am a little bit toasty right now. I put it on low, so it won't be that much of a disturbance. Anyway, backstory on Thor. Out of all the initial members of the Avengers, Iron Man, Hulk, even if you wanted to include people like Spider-Man and Wolverine, which have already been done before this, out of all the main characters that I feared for the most, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, was Thor. Because Thor had a very fantastical Lord of the Rings style element mixed with magic. That's kind of how Thor was to me. At least that's how I saw him. And if there was any film that they could have screwed up the easiest, it was Thor. Because they could have gotten so many things wrong, or it could have been so stupid, or in just in some ways just completely dumb and idiotic. Whereas, and as it turned out, they made a very good film, and that has to do with everything with the director they chose, Kenneth Branagh. And from what I know of Kenneth Branagh's work, he's kind of like a Guillermo del Toro, in which he tends to let his visuals and his looks make his film. That's not to say he always makes amazing films. He's worked on films like Road to El Dorado, the second Harry Potter film. I believe that was Chamber of Secrets. At the very least, he's acted as them. But he's had involvement in a lot of roles. He was acting in some of those roles. He directed a movie called Dead Again back in 1991. He directed Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit back in 2014. And even directed the live-action Cinderella film back in 2015, which, I have to say, aside from maybe Pete's Dragon, is probably the best of the live-action remake films, because they actually made that film with a point. They wanted to make it because they wanted to legitimately do something different, not just because they wanted to make money, like, say, Beauty and the Beast, which that movie can just go fuck itself. So, you had a guy with, like, Kenneth Branagh, who was a visionary, and, he worked in this kind of stuff before, so he knew kind of what to look for in terms of the overall look of the film. So, this film had a $150 million budget, made $449 million back. Keep in mind, the early Marvel films didn't make a shit ton of money like they do now, because they were still trying to prove themselves, and Thor was one of the ones that most definitely had to prove itself. Okay, so backstory on it. Now, I'm trying to make sure not to be too loud, because parents are sleeping in the other room. I shut their door because sometimes they leave the door wide open, so I shut it so I could speak more freely and not wake them up. Okay, but what's the plot? The plot, okay, the movie starts back in a flashback very similar to Iron Man, although, well, maybe not Iron Man, but very similar to Incredible Hulk, I should say, where we see the backstory of a war between Asgard, led by Odin, the king of Asgard, and the frost giant world of Jotunheim, and their leader Laufey, who was of course the leader of the frost giants. They wanted to conquer the 9 realms. They started with Earth back in 1965 AD, not BC, in case you're wondering. And Asgard was able to defeat Laufey and his army, and stole their source of power, which is called the They call it the Casket. The full name is the Casket of Ancient Winners. I don't believe, even though that's the full name, I do not believe they actually call it by its full name in film. I think that's only in the comics. Um, and of course, Odin is telling this story of what happened to the frost giants to his two sons, Thor, god of lightning, and Loki, god of mischief. We cut back to the present, 2011. Odin is about to prepare Thor and is about to make him the king of Asgard. But they are interrupted when a few frost giants come in to try to steal a casket. They're easily destroyed by a creation of Asgard called I believe it's called the Destroyer. I was about to say Devastator, like from friggin' Transformers. No, the Destroyer. And against Odin's wishes, because remember, his coronation to be king was interrupted. Against his wishes, Thor actually goes to Jotunheim to confront Laufey and the Frost Giants. And he takes with him his brother Loki, of course, who kind of eggs him on not eggs him on to go to Jotunheim, but kind of eggs him on to do something about it. And he takes with him Sif, who was a childhood friend of his, and apparently is a female warrior. I guess it's not seen that much in Asgard at this time. And the Warriors 3, Volstagg, Fandral, and Hogun. No, not Hulk Hogan. Hogun. Hogun. So, they got very clear here. And I actually really like the Warriors 3. Volstagg is basically the Gimli of the group. Fandral is basically the kind of like a very English-like Aragorn. If it was Aragorn and he was very English and very elegant and prim and proper and had the freaking facial hair and everything, that would be Aragorn. Like imagine Boromir Aragorn had a son that was raised to be a gay Englishman. That is this guy. Now that I've put that image into your head, it'll never leave. You're welcome. And Hogun, who's actually played by a Japanese actor in this film, he's very much like Legolas, where he doesn't speak all that much, but when he does, he makes a point. So, yeah, kind of taking a Lord of the Rings comparison there, which is why I equated this film similar to Lord of the Rings. Back on topic, they all go to Jotunheim. Shit goes down, they fight against the Frost Giants in what is actually a very entertaining action scene. And they are rescued by Odin right when they're about to be, killed. And they go back to Asgard. Thor, who's very pompous and very immature, he opens his mouth too much, says too many idiotic things, and is therefore banished. He's banished to Earth, and not only is he banished, he's stripped of all of his powers as a god, as well as taken away the weapon, his weapon, the hammer, Mjolnir, which of course is weird to say, but to bear with me here. And when he was banished to Earth, Odin sent the hammer after Thor. Should anybody be worthy to wield it, they would. Thor lands in New Mexico, and we actually see this at the very beginning of the film, very similar to Iron. That's what I was thinking when I thought of Iron Man earlier. At the very first scene of the movie, we see a young woman named Jane Foster, played in this film by Natalie Portman, her assistant Darcy Lewis, and a colleague of hers, a mentor in a sense, Dr. Eric Selvig. I guess they're looking up, what's going on in the sky, abnormalities and shit. They go to this middle of like a almost like a twister-looking thing, and they using Natalie Portman's Jane Foster's car. For some reason, I had to remember her name there. Keep in mind, it's 9:54 now, so give me a break. They run into him, and he starts, and of course, he's mortal. And of course, we cut back to now the present part of the movie, where he's captured, he's sent to the hospital. This is, now I explained a lot in the backstory. I know it sounds like a lot, but I explained a lot. Here it actually starts to mellow out a little bit. And it's actually a very simple, well-told story. Basically, Thor is trying to, it's kind of like a fish out of water story, say the person back in time, in the future, or whatever like that, or in a different environment. And yeah, Thor does do that. He constantly calls himself Thor. He believes himself greater to some of the other humans that are trying to pull him down. He goes into a pet store looking for a horse. He breaks a mug full of a drink and generally acts like a jackass, though not a hateable jackass, like a likable jackass. As in a very clever scene. Actually, well, I'll get to that. A very clever way, I'll get to that later. He eventually discovers the location of Mjolnir, which has since been found by S.H.I.E.L.D., which is what we saw at the end, in the post-credit scene of Iron Man 2. And he invades the S.H.I.E.L.D. facility, beats up a shit ton of guys. Of course, he's had training in Asgard, so obviously he would know how to fight even without his godlike powers. Tries to find the hammer, but he cannot pull the hammer out of the ground, and that's when he begins to realize his faults and how, for the first time ever, he has no idea what to do. He's always known what to do. He's always had a mission. Now Thor has no idea what to do. Meanwhile, and this is the clever part of the film, they don't just go from Asgard and we're stuck in contemporary Earth for the rest of the film. No, they often cut back to Asgard to show what's happening there. And what's happening is Loki, and this was hinted at during the battle on Jotunheim, Loki is actually not Odin's biological son, rather an adoptive son. During the Battle of Jotunheim, Loki was taken from Jotunheim as a baby and was raised to be Odin's second child. Now, with that being said, after he figures that out, he confronts Odin about it. Odin can't handle the stress of everything and falls into the Odin sleep, which is basically like an old man taking a long break so he can regain his energy, kind of thing. It's also discovered, by the way, that not only is he a frost giant, Loki also happens to be Laufey's son. Yes, he is Laufey's biological son. And of course he was taken because, hopefully to keep the bridge in between, sorry, I got mosquito bites. Keep the bridge in between Asgard and Jotunheim alive, because of course they had a truce after the war. So he falls into the Odin sleep. Loki takes command as the king of Asgard for the time being. He sends a vision of himself because he can do that. To Thor, telling him that his father's dead, which of course he's not, but he's always been jealous of Thor, and he wants Thor to remain banished on Earth. And when when Sif and the Warriors 3, I've had enough of Loki's shit. They go to Earth to try to get Thor back to Asgard. Loki discovers this. He sends the Destroyer after them. Kills Thor. He does kill Thor, and he's pretty much near death by this point. But then, of course, as Thor did sacrifice himself to save everyone else, the hammer returns to him because, now he's worthy of wielding Mjolnir. He gets his powers back, he summons lightning, and he just destroys the Destroyer. He kisses Jane Foster goodbye because, dad ass. And then we cut back to Asgard. In Asgard, Thor confronts Loki as he's about to let Laufey kill Odin, because of course part of the plan was that Loki would allow Laufey to kill Odin, only to lure him in and kill Laufey himself. He does, but then Thor shows up and confronts Loki about, everything, and they fight, and now Loki wants to destroy Jotunheim using the Bifrost, which is basically like a teleportation, and it's said earlier in the film, if they were to use the full power of the Bifrost, it could actually destroy an entire area or planet or something. And that's exactly what Loki plans to do to Jotunheim, and Thor, of course, knows that's wrong. Now that he's learned his lesson, has become more of a peacekeeper rather than a war seeker. He fights Loki. He breaks the bridge so that the Bifrost falls and is destroyed. And during the ensuing struggle, Odin wakes up to try to save his sons. But after Odin rejects the idea of Loki trying to destroy Jotunheim for him, much like Thor wanted to, Loki falls into the abyss. Everyone is saddened. And of course, Loki can't go back to Earth to see Jane Foster because, like I said, the Bifrost has been destroyed. So that's basically the ending of the film. In the post, and of course, Foster's trying to find a way to use it, open a portal to Asgard because, of course, she wants some of that young ass. In the post-credit scene, you're probably wondering, okay, what's the post-credit scene? The post-credit scene. Eric Selvig, who in this movie is played by Stellan Skarsgård, is taken to a S.H.I.E.L.D. facility where Nick Fury, he opens a briefcase, which shows the Tesseract. Which, of course, would be, it looks like a cube, but we don't know exactly what it was until the next film, which was called the Tesseract. And he thought it could be unlimited power if tapped incorrectly. Loki, using his little mischievous ways, of course he lived, prompts Selvig to agree, and he goes and starts working on the Tesseract. Okay, so it took a lot to get through in terms of the plot, but keep in mind, it's late, and I might be veering off here and there. Now, and to be fair, I can make it up for it in this way. There's not really a whole lot to break down, which is the good thing, which means I can make this faster. Most of the actors are very much on point. This is a very good movie. Still is very good. Most of the actors are on point. Chris Hemsworth, who is, 26, 27 years old, he absolutely nails his role as Thor. He was awesome. Natalie Portman did, I think, not a great job, but she did a good job as Natalie Portman. It just so happened she was outshined by a lot of other actors. For example, and of course, like Chris Hemsworth, who basically stole the show because of how charismatic he is. Natalie Portman was good as Jane Foster, though, still. Tom Hiddleston was pretty good as Loki in this film. Of course, he would go on to be great in later films, such as The Avengers and so on and so forth. Just turned out to be a great villain. Then, Lady Sif and the Warriors 3, all of their actors. Sif is portrayed by Jamie Alexander, who is hot as hell. Like, oh, if I could get that chick in my bed, I would bang her all night. That's fucked up. But she's hot though. She is that, in my opinion, Jamie Alexander is that hot. She's got that, she's hot, but she's also got the cute factor to him, which makes it better. Josh Dallas plays Fandral. Todd, how do I say his name? I got it written right down right here. Tadanobu Asano plays Hogan. Oh, okay. Kazuchika Okada, no. I wish. Kat Dennings plays Darcy Lewis. I'll get to Kat Dennings. Got Rene Russo as Frigga, who does a decent job, but is not really in the film all that much. And doesn't really add an impact. Who does add an impact, though, is Anthony Hopkins. Yes, the great Anthony Hopkins as Odin. Anthony Hopkins was fantastic in his role. He looks like a father. He looks like he looks like an authoritarian figure, and he feels like a god. He completely embodies the role of Odin. He does a great job. Let's see, who is the guy who played Volstagg? Ray Stevenson, who I think who according to this was in Punisher Warzone. Poor Ray Stevenson. he should have gotten a better deal. Idris Elba does a great job as Heimdall. Doesn't do all that much, but whenever he's on screen, he's like this giant hulking figure that doesn't take shit from anybody. It has one kind of funny moment in the film. Like I said, most of the actors are very much on point. Of course, Clark Gregg reprises his role as Phil Coulson from the Iron Man movies. We see an early version of Jasper Sitwell, more on him in Captain America: Civil War. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, and we even get, and we don't know this at the time, but we even get a cameo appearance from Jeremy Renner as Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye. Yes, technically Hawkeye's first film was not in Avengers, it was in Thor, and it was for like 30 seconds anyway, which is kind of weird, but then again, it was a cameo, so I don't mind that too much. But like I said, most of the actors were on point. Colm Feore as Laufey, he was kind of the 2D, like, the one-dimensional villain of he just wanting to take over everything, but to be fair, we kind of had Loki for the dimensional villain, so I'm actually okay with that. And on top of that, he looked cool. So yeah, most of the actors except for one was on point. We'll get to that in a bit. The visuals, oh man, and this is where Kenneth Branagh comes in. The visuals for New Mexico is very contemporary. Basically, when you're on Earth, nothing of any real importance aside from maybe the SHIELD facility stands out. It's shot well, but aside from the SHIELD facility, nothing stands out as, oh, that looks beautiful, that looks pretty, because they're in a desert town. Whereas the real effects come in when you're on Asgard. Oh, Asgard looks beautiful in this film. It looks gorgeous. It looks great. The shots, the visuals, the brightly lit colors, the way the Bifrost looks like when it's being used. Oh, it just looks fantastic. Oh man, that's where a lot of the money went. Clearly not to Chris Hemsworth's pocket, as he was paid initially $100,000 for the role. I mean, you're probably thinking, man, even for a Marvel role for a first film, that's pretty low. To be fair, Chris Hemsworth was in the very early stages of his career, so they were taking a chance on him, and thankfully it worked. So yeah, you had that. You had great special effects, not just from the visuals, but just you know, from the fighting. Although there is one that I do think could have been improved on. More on that in a bit. So there's a lot of things. The music, I think, is very good, and like I said earlier, I mentioned this earlier. The cinematography, the way it's shot, that looks very good. The way this film is shot is it's just very well done. Very similar to how the first Iron Man film was shot, with long angle shots or wide shots that go on for some time, that reveals something else. It's one of those little things that really makes a film pop. So there are a lot of things to enjoy in this film. The writing is pretty good. Most of it's pretty good, except for a couple things. And this is where I get to the criticisms. First of all, let's get to the only cast member I really did not like in this film, and that's Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis. She was not that great. Now, to be fair, she was a lot better than she would be in Thor: The Dark World, and more on that when I get to that film. But Kat Dennings just, oh man, she does not do a good job in this film. And I haven't seen her in any other roles, but her role as Darcy Lewis. Darcy Lewis, basically, she's a completely useless villain. She's used basically for comic relief and almost to be Jane Foster's like assistant. They even have on Wikipedia telling her that she's like a little helper gnome. That is not a good look, and I think that's very she's just not that good. She's not that good, and honestly, she hurts the film. Frigga, I did say earlier that Rain Russo as Frigga doesn't really stand out that much, but to be fair, the focus wasn't really on her. And whenever she is on screen, she does do a good job, so I will say that. But yeah, Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis is the one negative on this film. Now, with that being said, well, okay, what about a couple other things? One thing, a little bit of a nitpick, but the special effects for the Destroyer could have been worked on better. You had great effects for the Frost Giants and various other creatures, but the Destroyer looked a little bit too CG, and I understand it is a mechanical creation and not something like Iron Man where it's a person in a suit. I understand that. But I do think that this film could have worked on, add a couple extra money into the effect for the Destroyer, and I think you would have had an absolutely amazing effect. As it is, what we got was okay. The one other thing about this film I will say is that because it's a fish out of water story, it does kind of follow the same fish out of water tropes, but that's not a bad thing if it's executed well, and it's executed well. But, I just felt that needed to be said. Although, the one thing I did have to bring up. Whenever we're on Asgard, everything pops and you're completely into what's going on. When you're on Earth, there are times when it's a little bit too slow. Well, maybe not too slow. It's slow, but not, horribly so, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because you do see Thor learning, and I did say earlier, the one clever thing about him was that they easily could have had Thor been, oh no, I don't want to change, I don't want to follow the rules. Thor's like, when Thor, after he breaks the leg, he's like, you can't do that here, and it's not how we do things. He's like, okay. It's like you see in a lot of films, you see people not do that and be stubborn and be childish. Thor's just like, okay. I'll go along with it. And on top of that, Thor is very charismatic in this film. And that all has to do with Chris Hemsworth's role. I mean, this role was made for Chris Hemsworth. One other thing I have to bring up. Going back to the previous point. But yeah, like I said, one of the things that usually these Marvel films tend to have done well in is the relationships between the characters. Not that there is no relationship between the characters, but I will admit while I was watching the film, the romance between Thor and Jane Foster was a little. I mean, that only happened in a couple of days, and exactly what did, aside from the whole big wide aspect of him being a god. What did Jane Foster really see in Thor before that, other than the fact that the guy was ripped, the guy was well-toned? Then we had, it's like, that does seem a little bit rushed. I'm like, I always thought Thor and Sif should have been a thing. They were childhood friends. I'm like, I want to see that relationship in the next film, if there is another Thor film. So, okay. All that being said, what do I give the rating? I give it an 8 out of 10. It's a very good film, not a great film. It doesn't reach the heights of, say, Iron Man, but it is a much-needed improvement on both Incredible Hulk and Captain America. And Iron Man 2 and Incredible Hulk. Never mind. I'm thinking on the next movie, obviously. So, 8 out of 10. Good. It's very good, just not great, but that's not a bad thing, as it does give us a very good entry into the series. Until next time, guys, be well, stay safe, have a good day, and next time I will come back to you with my Captain America: The First Avenger review. Until next time, guys, peace.